Welcome to the Final Frontiers radio show, where we spotlight inspiring missionary endeavors around the globe. Stay tuned to hear how you can personally get involved, helping the Lord's frontline soldiers effectively advance the gospel where it has never been preached before. Today, we'll have Tiffany Byram back with us, sharing a moving story that impacted her life in Zambia, Africa. And we'll have a testimony of a child supported by a Final Frontiers sponsor like you through the Touch a Life program. Hello, this is Joshua Martin, and today on the podcast I have Tiffany Byram. She's a Harvest Baptist Bible College student in Fort Dodge, Iowa. I met her along with a lot of other students there at the Ignite conference that just took place not that long ago. We were able to teach on missions, and it was an exciting time. Several people came up to me, but Tiffany came up right after a session I did on Islam, and she started asking questions about that. And we talked about Azerbaijan, we talked about the Islamic faith, and I got to find out that she had been in 6 missions trips around the world. Mm-hmm. Now, you went to Mexico, you went to Guatemala, then you went to the Philippines twice, and then you went to Zambia. What's the 6th one?
It was Haiti. It was in between the 2 trips to the Philippines. I went to Haiti.
All right.
Yeah, I was there for 3 weeks or a month, I think, something like that. So that was a pretty cool trip, too. It was different from the other ones, but it was a good trip.
Any specific stories or something that really moved you in a country?
You know what? When I was in Zambia last year, there's a story. We had, the first week I was there, they had a youth conference, and I was in charge of all the registration. And then the second week I was there, we had a deaf conference, and I was also in charge of all the registration. So I learned sign language that week.
Wow.
And, yeah, and so they had, in Zambia, people get very sick, and they do not have good doctoring there. They have a lot of malaria. And so a lot of people are deaf. A lot of young people are deaf. And so they had this deaf conference, and there were, I don't remember the numbers, but there were 200, 300 deaf people at this conference at least. And I just would go out and just talk to them for hours just to learn sign language and to get to know them and stuff like that. Well, there was this one girl that got very sick during the conference, and I didn't meet her during the conference, but after the conference, she had to stay in the compound where we all were living. There's a Bible college in the compound and the missionary's house and all of that. And So this one girl got very sick during the conference, and she was sick for a week and a half, really, really badly sick. And she was vomiting, and she was just, she had a really bad fever and all this stuff. And they took her to the hospital there, and we were in Livingston, Zambia, which is right by the falls, which is one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. And so there's actually quite a bit of tourism there and a lot of white people.
Yeah.
But there were no good doctors there. And so we took her to the hospital, and they just gave her injections for the pain. She was in really bad pain. They just gave her injections, and then they brought her back, and she was still throwing up and all this stuff. And she was very, 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 very sick. She couldn't walk. She couldn't move. She would just be screaming in pain. And anyway, so a few days later, we took her to another doctor, and they had me go along so that I could translate for her what the doctor was saying and stuff like that and what she was saying to the doctor. And so they took her to, the nicest doctor in the whole city, and it was an East Indian man. And they took her into this room, and they laid her down, and she was in all this pain and kept throwing up and collapsing and passing out. And he came in, and all he did was he checked her heartbeat, and he felt her stomach, and he was like, she's in a lot of pain. And we're like, yeah. And he's like, okay, we're going to give her a shot for the pain. And all he did was give her 1 shot for the pain and didn't check her for anything. And he said that she would be fine. And I, at that point, I don't remember all of what was happening to her, but I at that point was like, this girl needs to be tested for things. She's dying. You could see she was dying. And he said she was fine, and said, oh, just give her a couple days, she can go home. So a couple days later, she got on a bus. Her mom came to get her. She got on a bus, and she went home. And on the bus ride home, it was a 10, 12-hour bus ride home, she died.
Wow.
And she was only 17. She was just this tiny little thing, and she was deaf. And when I heard that she died, I just cried and cried and cried and cried and cried. I just remember all I could think of was, if this girl had been in the States, a doctor would have taken care of her. There's no way she would have died. She was dehydrated, and she needed hooked up to, a drip. And I just thought, all I could think was, if she had been in the States, or if there had been a doctor who knew how to do anything, she would have probably lived. And this poor little girl probably was deaf because a doctor didn't take care of her when she was a kid, and then she lived her life deaf, and then she died when she was 17 years old. And thinking that she was going to be fine and go home. And it's just like everyone around me they didn't understand why I was so upset about it, because they've grown up in this culture of a lot of people die young. You don't see very many old people because of age. And I just remember thinking how sad it is, and how I thought, like, why if an American decided to come here and be a missionary, they would have such an open door of opportunity to actually save people's lives firstly, and then witness to these people who are in desperate need of real health care. And I don't know, it's just stuff like that where I can't do anything, and I know I'll never be able to do anything, but what if I had been a doctor? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this, what it was that girl got saved during the conference the week before. And so, but yeah, anyway, so I feel like that is like pretty much when I cried the hardest at something overseas, because it was so sad, because I took care of her, and it was so sad. So
when you talk about seeing people like that in other countries, someone who takes a missions trip, no matter your age, you're going to see things in the third world that'll affect you for the rest of your life, and it does change you. We've talked about that before. I know that when you talk about someone who's deaf, it reminds me of this girl who was also like 16 or 17 when I was in India last time. And I can remember being in this really poor village, and there she was. We came around this corner, and she was a part of one of the families that were there, and the storms had just ravaged their houses, and their roofs were falling in and everything. And here she is. She can't hear, and she can't speak. And she was standing there, and she had these just huge, wide eyes. And I thought, how has she grown up this many years? What has her life been like? How do you share the gospel with somebody like that? It completely just shattered my heart when I thought, okay, she can't hear, and she can see, but that's it. I mean, she can't even hear her parents. She can't go to school there, and she can't speak. So how does that happen, and how do you reach somebody like that? And all that I could do that day, I was just so brokenhearted over, was I went into town and bought her a really nice pair of shoes, some new shoes, just something. And she would never even know it was me. I mean, how would you even communicate that it was the preacher that came through, the missionary?
Right.
And yet your heart has to do something. And I can't imagine what that would have been like for you to take care of someone and see that situation and then hear that they passed away on the trip back. That's just devastating.
Yeah. And it's crazy, the deaf people at the conference, they come from villages and, not in the city. A lot of them did. And they didn't speak any sign language. And there was this one boy, I remember, he was just like ADHD type of kid, but he's deaf and he can't communicate with anybody. He doesn't know any sign language. And this kid was just like this gangly, and he would go up to people and just start like flailing his arms around, because he didn't understand how all the other deaf people were actually communicating. And so you could tell he would come up to me and he'd look so frustrated, and he'd look at my eyes and he'd get really close to my face, and then he'd just start flailing his arms and making faces and making noises, and he'd start doing stuff like jumping jacks and doing cartwheels. And I remember being so sad, because this poor kid lived in a village his whole life. He can't even communicate. I mean, I'm sure that at some point in time his family has figured out some method of communication, but it obviously was not very effective, because he seemed so frustrated to express himself to people, And I just thought, how sad is that nobody ever took the time to teach this kid to speak sign language so that he could at least communicate with other deaf people? Like, so sad. This kind of stuff all over the world, and it's just,
Yeah, you see this. If you travel anywhere, your heart will get big with burdens. Your heart will get broken. So many burdens out there. This is the kind of stuff that where our national preachers for Final Frontiers, they see this all the time. That's why we have the Touch of Life program, and we've got the Daily Bread program, and these different things that we're doing to try to help widows and orphans that go through this. And those programs are literally helping with the medical supplies. And so school supplies, medical supplies, because we've seen them suffering over there. And if we can make just a little bit of difference in some of these children's lives, and the pastors that are in these other countries, the national preachers, the church planners, their children are poor. And if you that's why we're trying to do at Final Frontiers is to be able to take care of their kids, because that lightens the load so that they're not trying to work every day just to provide food and keep their family alive. And so being able to provide them with medical expenses and help them be able to get some education and be able to feed them, that's the kind of programs that we have here that help with that, because those burdens they rip our hearts out. You go over there, there's stuff I will never forget. And I'm sure that you've seen things not only there, but even in the Philippines and Guatemala, like you said, and Haiti. You said that you've been to Haiti as well. So, yeah, a lot of burdens, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Statistics tell us that more than 72,000 children die every day because of hunger-related causes. For those who cannot fully sponsor a child, any amount, no matter how small, is welcome to the ministry we call Daily Bread. It works through local churches to provide food in bulk to needy children who do not yet have a sponsor. For more information, visit finalfrontiers.org.
Today I wanted to give you a little insight into our Daily Bread program. Now this information comes from our third quarter 2018 progress report over on page 22, so if you want to see the pictures that accompanied it, then feel free to take a look at it online over at finalfrontiers.world. Our Daily Bread program provides food in bulk to feed hungry children and families who are not yet sponsored through our Touch of Life ministry. We provide almost 100,000 meals every month all around the globe. Buying in bulk to feed hundreds of children at a time allows us to do so at a lower cost per child ratio. And because kids fed by Daily Bread are not officially sponsored, we don't have to allocate funds for clothes, shoes, school supplies, thank you letters, and photographs. Unsponsored children who are near a Touch of Life feeding center eat with the sponsored children, so there is no extra cost for cooks and staff. Separate Daily Bread feeding centers are operated by volunteer staff. Our intention is to serve tasty, nutritious, and typical foods that they would eat at home if there were food at home to eat. Here are some of the typical meals that the children eat in the different countries where we currently operate. The first stop is India. There is an incredible variety of inexpensive Indian food, but keep in mind that though even Hindus usually will not eat beef, they will eat other proteins, especially pork, fish, and chicken. Their rice is a better variety than what we eat. It is called basmati and has a light and fresh taste. Generally, they will have a type of flatbread like naan or chapati, and small portions of vegetables and sauces for taste. The food consumed has a variety of colors and textures, and of course, comes in a varying degree of spicy. Now over to Cambodia. Similar to all Asian foods, it can be wet or dry, but is almost always accompanied by either rice or a rice noodle. They enjoy nuts cooked in the food as well as tomatoes, peas, and hot peppers. Even the children like the spicy flavors. Cambodians also like all varieties of meat, including fish. We have several opportunities in Cambodia to expand our program for feeding the children, with several small orphanages needing support. If you are interested, then please get in contact with us. One of the orphanages is completely supported by a business here in the USA, and it is such a blessing for them to have that consistent support. Not too far away from Cambodia is Myanmar. Here food is a mixture between Indian and Oriental styles. There is always rice, and eggs are a good source of protein. But meat is available in small portions, used more for flavor than for filling. There is also an abundance of bananas and vegetables. Over to Africa and the country of Uganda. Ugandans love matoke and G-nut sauce, to which you can add beef, pork, goat, or chicken. Matoke is a starchy variety of banana that is cooked and either mashed or pounded, in some cases steamed. It can be topped with any available meat or sauce to add flavor and sustenance. Now we finish off the world tour in Central America in the country of Honduras. Every day you've got to have rice, beans, and tortillas, and the kids love it if you add some eggs, chicken, meat, or pork, and of course we have to put in some vegetables. They also like fried plantains with sour cream, and of course, more tortillas. As you can see, the variety of food varies from country to country, but is made specifically for the local diet. Please go to finalfrontiers.world so you can download the third quarter progress report and view the pictures of these dishes. Thank you to all who support this vital ministry that is visibly demonstrating the love of Christ to communities around the world.
Your inquiries and comments are important to us. If you have questions or perhaps subject matter you would like to have addressed on this show, please visit us at finalfrontiers.world.
Because our ministry of supporting national church planners is so effective, They produce numbers that are astounding to most and by many unbelievable. I think the primary reason is the doubters do not really understand what a church is. In our American culture, we hear the term church and think of a building. We know that is not technically correct, but the image has become so ingrained in us that we even refer to the building as being God's house, knowing full well that it is not the building, but our bodies that are the temple of God. We think of church not as worshipers, but as a place of worship, with property, having a baptistry, pews, a pulpit with a choir, robes optional, songbooks, and even a parking lot, signboard, offices, and a fellowship hall with a full kitchen. A church is neither a location nor a facility. It is a congregation. We define church as, quote, a group of newly saved and baptized believers meeting together regularly for worship under the leadership of a pastor, end quote. The Bible refers to these congregations as churches meeting in homes. In each epistle, they have a place to meet, someone's house. They have a pastor, or several of them, and they have a people, a congregation of newly saved and baptized believers. Some churches, like Corinth, even had backslidden and unsaved participants meeting with them, and at times leading them. The church addressed in 3 John had a greedy and ungodly leader who refused to allow the congregation to assist missionaries and cast out members who did so anyway. No church is perfect because no people are perfect, even if their building is. For the most part, our churches start out in a home, a front porch, or under a tree. In time, they may acquire the trappings of what we in America call churches, but for the most part, they will spend their tithes supporting their pastors, caring for the needy, and evangelizing the lost. That's a New Testament church at work. And that's why worldwide, we have a new convert every 18 seconds and a new church being started every 11 minutes. How's that for astounding? I'm John Nels. To learn more about missions, order a copy of my book, The Great Omission, on our website at finalfrontiers.world.
You've been listening to the Final Frontiers radio show, funded by sponsors like you. Thank you so much for joining us. Through the funding of national and native preachers, we endeavor to effectively advance the gospel where it has never been preached before. If you want more information, visit www.finalfrontiers.world. That's finalfrontiers.world.